It's a bad hair day. Hey guys, welcome back to Turn of the Century Games. I'm Mike. Today, I got a special video for you guys. So, normally we do a playthrough on the channel, but today I got some cool stuff in the mail. I want to show you guys what we're going to do with it. But first, let's take a second and appreciate something. An old blue TV screen. We also have, if I can get it to focus, this is a Super Nintendo. And this right here is a Troy Aikman football video game. Troy Aikman football, decent football game for its time. You're probably wondering why on earth I'm droning on about this. Really, I just wanted to show you guys that this is indeed a Troy Aikman football. Running on legitimate hardware. Maybe. There we go. So, yeah, it's Troy Aikman football. I'm gonna cut right here. We'll be right back in 1 second. Alright, so I'm back. Had to go ahead and move to my workstation here. So we've got here, I'm not sure if you guys can make that out or not. This is a 3.8mm star bit. It's actually the bit that will open up these case screws on Super Nintendo games. You also commonly will see 4.5mm. That's used to actually open up the SNES console and the Sega Genesis games. So we'll go ahead and we'll remove one screw there, set it down. I'll show you guys the guts of this cart. Trying to get the best camera angle. I'm not the best at doing this, especially since this is just my beginning YouTube channel. And there's the second screw. Don't drop it. Okay, we'll go ahead and put our tool down. We'll go ahead and we'll open up this cart. Just kind of, so Super Nintendo carts lift from the bottom, and then you slide them out. So there's the front of the game. Exact same one that I showed you guys. Now this is the board that's actually in the game. Now there's a couple of components here that we could, there we go, that we could go over real quick. You got your save battery, obviously you'll need that for games that save. You've got the SRAM chip. This is the memory of the board, so in conjunction with the battery, that's what holds your save. You have, let's see, which one's which? Okay, so on Super Nintendo games you have the MAD1 chip, which is just a decoder. It basically tells these two chips how they should operate. This here is your CIC chip. It's basically a lockout chip. It's used for region protection. And these two chips over here that I talked about a little bit earlier, these are actually the ROM chips. These are what store your game. Now, Troy Aikman Football is pretty interesting because it is a 2 megabyte game, but it's a little uncommon because it's not very common for games to actually use 2 ROM chips. So that actually makes the game that we're going to make today very easy to make because it can be made with a common UV EEPROM. The most commonly used is the 27C801, and I'll go ahead and I'll get one of those guys to show you here shortly. Okay, so I went ahead and I got the M27C801 for you guys here. This is it. Like I said before, it is a, come on, focus, focus, please, please focus. Maybe. Well, anyways, you guys will have to take my word for it. What's unique about this chip and all the other chips that I'm going to use for my repros is this little window right here. This window here, when UV light gets into this window, it actually erases the circuitry. This is a 32-pin DIP chip, DIP IC. Basically, it's a through-hole chip, and this chip will actually hold 1 megabyte of information, or 8 megabits. And of course, the board that we have has slots for 2, so we can actually go ahead and we can make up to a 2 megabyte game, and the MAD chip will actually go ahead and take care of telling the game which chip it needs to read from at any given time. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to do that now. We're going to go ahead and we're going to program our game to 2 of these chips, and then we're going to desolder these ones off of this board, and I'll show you guys how to do that. Okay, so now that we're on our computer over here, there's a couple programs that we need to use before we can go ahead and burn our ROM to our EEPROM chip. The first application that we're going to be using is a utility called SNES Utility. Sorry, take that back. First thing we're going to be using is called Ucon64. Now, Ucon64 is a command prompt tool, so we'll have to come over to our search bar and open up a command prompt. Now, in our command prompt here, we want to run the command cd, which stands for change directory, because we need to be in the same directory as our Ucon executable. I have it over here, so we're going to go ahead and we're going to copy this path, and over here in our command prompt, after we've typed cd, we'll type space, right click to automatically paste the path, and hit enter. That'll change us into this Ucon directory. Now what we need to do is we need to point Ucon at our Slayer's ROM, which is what we're burning to our EEPROMs. So what we're going to do is we're going to type in the name of the executable, ucon64.exe, hit a space, and then go ahead and put a quote, because if there are any spaces in your... Get down from there, Donald. Sorry about that, guys. If there are any spaces in your file name, for whatever reason, Ucon64 will not read it correctly. And I put the Slayer's ROM here in this folder, so we'll go ahead and copy the path from here. Back over here to the command prompt, right click to paste. And now I have to put in a slash. On my computer it shows yeah, and there's an explanation for that on the screen there. And type in the name of the file. Neat thing about command prompt is if you start typing something, you can actually just hit tab and it will pull whatever the first thing is that it finds in the directory. So there we go, we've got Slayers space Japan.sfc and quote, it ended it for us. Hit enter and we're going to get a bunch of information from the Ucon64 program. The important bits here, a couple important bits here. So the first important one is this line right here, this line where it says high ROM. So when you're burning Super Nintendo games, there are two different types of Super Nintendo games. There are high ROM games and there are low ROM games. Very important that you know what type of ROM your game is, because there are two types of boards out in the wild for the SNES. There are high ROM boards and there are low ROM boards. They correspond to high ROM and low ROM games. You cannot put a low ROM game on a high ROM board. Likewise, you can't put a high ROM game on a low ROM board. It just doesn't work. And there's no way around it. At least not to my knowledge. Not without significant amount of remapping and everything else. It's just not worth even attempting to make it work. So, that's important. So, here we can tell that Slayers is a low ROM game, because it says high ROM no. Troy Aikman Football, also a low ROM game. So we're good there. Internal size 16 megabits, so that means it's a 2 megabyte game. Each one of the ROM chips that we're going to be putting on the board holds 1 megabyte, so that's perfect. ROM type, we have, this basically just gives you information about the board for the game that you were originally making. Correction. It gives you information about the board for the ROM that you're reproducing. So in this case, for Slayers, it tells us that Slayers, when it was on its own board, it had the ROM chips, it had an SRAM chip, and it had a battery. Fantastic, because we know that Troy Aikman Football has all of those things. The biggest reason you want to look at this line is just to check for anything special. When I say special, I mean stuff like the Super Effects chip from Star Fox 64. If you were making a game that uses the Super Effects chip, you obviously have to sacrifice a game that has a Super Effects chip, because that can't be recreated in any way, shape, or form using legitimate hardware. Obviously, there are things, I don't even think like the EverDrives, like the flash carts, can emulate those properly yet. I'll have to look into that. There will be something down here probably that'll tell you. The last things that we want to look at are the checksum and inverse checksum. You can see that both of these are labeled as bad. Now, why this is important is that if we were to burn the ROMs as are to our chips, the Super Nintendo actually will not boot them, because the Super Nintendo at boot, to the best of my knowledge, does a check on the checksum of the ROM that it's trying to read. If it doesn't match, if it doesn't show up as a good checksum, then the Super Nintendo just refuses to boot it. and you get like a red screen. So we're going to be fixing that as well here. So for right now, we are actually done with Yukon. I'm just going to minimize this because we are going to be coming back to it just to be sure that everything worked. We're going to minimize this window here, and the next program we're going to open up is SNES Utility. This is the one I originally told you we were going to launch. So let's go ahead and open it up. This program is also commonly called Wasabi, just because of the artwork up here at the top. So we're going to go ahead and open up our game here in Wasabi. And we're doing this just to confirm a couple things. Okay, so what we wanted to confirm was that the game is in fact 2 megabytes and that it is a 16 megabit low ROM game. It's also NTSC, which means that it will work on our North American Super Nintendo. If this was a PAL game, it likely would not, unless you have a way of converting a PAL game to NTSC, and that's not very common. This will not work if this was a PAL game. The biggest reason being that there are differences in the way that PAL TV sets back in the day worked. PAL sets operated on 50 hertz, whereas NTSC, which was used in North America and Japan, worked on 60 hertz. So if this was a European game, which is the primary area for the PAL region, we would not be able to put that game on a cart because it just wouldn't run properly. There'd be all sorts of graphical glitches and all kinds of problems if we could even get it to run. So we're actually done with Wasabi for now. We're going to go ahead and close it. We will be coming back to it. It is our primary application. So the next one we got to do is IPS and sum. This program here is actually the program that's going to fix our checksum for us. So what we want to do is we're going to go to File and Open. And we're on our desktop here. We got to find our ROMs folder. There it is. Slayers, open it up. Now it's not going to tell you anything, but it is loaded. Go ahead and click File and click Repair SNES Checksum. It'll tell you that, hey, this checksum doesn't match. You want to repair it? Absolutely, that's why we're using it. And then it tells us don't forget to save the ROM. Hit OK, File, and then click Save. That will write your ROM data back to the ROM with the corrected checksum. To verify, we can actually go back to Yukon 64. This is why we left it open. We're just going to tap up on our keyboard here, and we're going to rerun the last command. And you can see here now it shows that the checksum and inverse checksums are okay. So that's perfect. That's what we want to see. So let's go ahead and close out Yukon. We are actually done with it. We're going to go back to SNES Util, or Wasabi, whatever you want to refer it to. I will commonly interchange them. We're going to go to File, Open, and we're going to open up our ROM yet again. Now, it's not going to tell us anything different, but what we want to do here is we want to actually click this button here that says Swap Bin. And you'll see there in the little box it says All-in-One, removes header, splits ROM, and swaps the bytes to fit to an EEPROM. Now, once we check Swap Bin, it gives us a single option to swap all the pins to fit a 27C801. The reason we are doing this is because the pinout on a C27 801, or a 27C801, sorry, the pinout on it is different from the pinout on the SNES mask ROMs that come on the boards. What we're doing here is we're rerouting some of the information to different pins so that we don't have to rewire a whole lot of pins. When we do this, we will only have to rewire one pin. Well, I say one pin, really it's 2 pins. We got to reroute pins 31 and 24. For those of you wondering, this part here is actually being recorded post recording the actual video, just because I lost this footage beforehand. So if the rest of the video makes sense where I'm like, I don't know which pins to do, that's why. So we're going to go ahead and we will click Swap Bin 27C801. We hit OK. Remember, this is a 2 megabyte game, so it's going to go ahead and spit out 2 ROM files. We're going to hit OK, and that should, if we go back to our ROMs folder here, I closed it. Let me open it back up. There, you see we have a Slayers 01 and a Slayers 02. Those files will get written to the chips respectively. So we're going to close out of this, we're going to close out of this, and we're going to close out of Wasabi. Now we've got to go to our programming software. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to open up our programming software, ready to go. It is XG Pro. Go ahead ahead and open that. Now I have the TL866 Plus, hit OK. That's saying that the programmer's not found. That's because I don't have it plugged in. So we're just going to run it in demo mode. What we'll do here is we'll go ahead and we'll open up our file. We're going to hit load, browse. You'll go ahead and load up the first bin, hit OK. Don't change anything here. Hit OK again. And you'll see over here in the left-hand window all this hex information. All of this is our first megabyte of the ROM information. Like, this is the game. Oh, what is this? I actually never saw this before. Can I expand this window at all? Okay, it doesn't look like I can expand this window, but that's interesting. It looks like there's a story here written into... I don't know if this is actually text from the game, or if this is... It kind of looks like... Wow. Huh. I'm gonna have to look into this some more, and I'll let you guys know if this is like actually part of the game, or if this is just like story that somebody put into the... Well, there it cuts off, so... Huh. This here looks like... Okay, I'm getting off... We're getting into the weeds here. Anyways, it looks like that might just actually be plain text from the game itself. So anyways, what we're going to do, up here in the Select IC box, we have the M27C801 already selected. Of course, this programming software can do a whole ton... Holy cow, that was really loud. Sorry about that. There's programming software can do a whole ton of ICs. In this case, we're using... And my hard drive just kicked in. Okay, there we go. My mouse is now unfrozen. Okay, so we hit select. That selects that. What we would do here is we would go ahead and we would load the ROM into, or the EEPROM into our programmer. And we would come over here and we would hit the program button. I, of course, don't have my programmer plugged in and I'm not burning anything right now. And then we'd click program and it would burn. And then we'd just repeat the process for the second ROM. So that covers the process of recording the information to the ICs that we're going to solder into our board. I will see you guys in the next part of the video when we start desoldering or soldering, whichever part came next. I don't remember off the top of my head. See you then.
Okay guys, so we've gone ahead, we've gotten the 27C801s completely programmed. They're sitting over there on the desk. What we need to do now is we need to take the board here and we need to remove the two ROM chips. To do that, I have a specialized tool that I've had from Radio Shack for years. This is a desoldering iron. And what it is, it's just a kind of like soldering iron, except it's got a tip that has an end here that's got a cone shape with a hole in the end of it, and it's got a bulb. What you do is take each individual pin. So these two chips here, you're going to take each one of the individual pins, and one at a time you will squeeze the bulb, put it over a pin very carefully, release, and that should, if I can get the camera to focus, it's not going to focus, should pull the solder away from the pin. You can see I've done those two there. So I will be right back as soon as I finish doing the other 30. See you in a bit. Okay, so got both ROM chips removed from the board. I have ROM chips number 1 and number 2 sitting here with me. Now, remember when I programmed these, I said that you would have to do some rewiring on a couple pins. The pins that you have to rewire on both chips when you're doing 27801s are pins 24 and pin 31. Yeah, because these are 32 pin chips. So when you're looking at an integrated circuit, the way that this works, where this little dip is, that indicates the top. And when you're looking at it, you start on the left hand side. So it goes pin 1, 2, 3, all the way down through 16, right? Then you start on the opposite side and you go up. So 17, 18, 19, all the way up to 32. So the pins we want to bend out are the second one from the top here. So let's go ahead and bend it out very carefully. You have to be real careful because you don't want it to snap off. If it snaps off, then you're out of luck. You gotta go reprogram another one. Alright, so there's pin 31 bent up. Just a little more, and then I gotta count for this one actually. So 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. Right like that. Okay, so your IC chips, if I could ever get this damn camera to focus. Hey, look at that. Finally focused. I touched the screen. So it should look like that. Okay. Now what we're going to do, the first ROM chip goes in the bottom slot. Conveniently on this board, right here next to the cartridge connector, they have it labeled U1 P0. And the nubby bit, the top of the IC, you can kind of see it's done up here in the mask of the PCB. It kind of shows you, but the nub, the top of the IC goes in this side. So you just seat that in there. Now, something that I didn't mention, because these don't like to slide in real well. Let me refocus here. Because these don't like to... Shit. Hold on here. Sorry about that noise there, guys. Something that I do to attempt to alleviate the problem of the pins not going in is I will actually take the IC and very carefully on the edge of the table that I'm working on apply even pressure to all of the pins to try and roll them in just a little bit. Of course, you want to be very careful not to roll in the ones that you just rolled out. There. Now this should just pop right into here. And if it doesn't, well, you just wiggle it around a little bit and eventually it does. Right like that. And now that chip is ready to be soldered in. However, I'm going to start with chip number 2 because it's in the middle. So again, pins number 31 and 24, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24. And look at both of these just to make sure that they're both exactly the same. They are. So go ahead and put in chip number 1. Oh wait, I'll roll it first. Roll that one. Okay. So, chip number 1 goes in, chip number 2 goes in. There we go. And what I'm going to do, would you hand me those fingernail clippers there? So what I'm actually going to do, because the ends of these legs actually come over where this other chip is going to be sitting, I'm going to clip, yes, using fingernail clippers, I'm going to clip the little nubs off the ends of the legs here. We don't actually need those anymore. Considering I have no plans on reprogramming these ever. If I ever need to reprogram these, what I'll need to do is I'll need to solder. I'll have to use the wires that I soldered each of these to now reprogram them. Not a big deal. Then I'll go ahead and I will take a small piece of wire. Specifically, I'm using 26 gauge wrapping wire. You don't need a lot of it, you just need enough to go from pin number 1 to pinhole number 2 and etc. All I do is I just use my fingernail clippers here just to strip off a little bit of the wire. You guys can kind of see that, sort of, maybe. Yeah, you know it's there. Go ahead. Oops, actually cut that one. Didn't want to do that. Make sure it'll still stretch. It should. I left plenty on there. So go ahead and make another small clamp on this. Just kind of pull at an angle. It should loosen up enough that it just peels right off. Helps if your hands aren't all sweaty. There we go. Okay, so we've successfully stripped wire number 1. We need 2 of these. Because remember, we gotta reroute 2 pins on each chip, which means realistically we need 4 of these. As long as I don't misclip this one will be long enough. There we go. There's 1. And here is number 2. Nope. Well, this one will work, but it's going to be real hard to work with it. There. Alright. So, what I usually do from this point, slide you guys back here just a bit. Slide this up. So what I'm actually going to do is I'm going to heat up my soldering iron here. About 360 degrees. Get out our little tub of flux paste, I guess you'll call it. I think that's the technical term for it. Just put a little on my finger. Rub it on those spots that we're going to be connecting to. And then I'll just take another smear here. We're going to go all the way down all these pins. I'm just going to kind of touch all of these pins. And then where the other one is going, where the other chip is going to go, I'm just going to go ahead and smear my finger in it again. Normally I do this beforehand, but I just take it and I just kind of smear it all along the holes where I'm going to be soldering. All this stuff does, if you guys aren't familiar with it, it just helps the solder to flow to where you need it to go. I'll go ahead and solder that there. Now my iron is hot enough. I'll go ahead and wipe the finger off here. Where's my solder at? There it is. Alright, got my solder. Just go ahead and clip it off. Hey, will you do me a favor? You go get that wet. All we're gonna do, we're gonna go ahead. We will. For those of you that aren't familiar with soldering, I'm not gonna bore you guys with a whole soldering tutorial here, but we'll go ahead and tin our iron. There we go. I'm going to touch it to that leg, and I'm going to add just a little bit of solder to it. There we go. Now, what we want to do is we want to flow this solder. Thank you. Brother Tyler's helping me out in the background here, so leave him some love in the comments. What we want to do, I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to dunk the end of this wire into the flux paste. We just want to try and, come on. Well, what we really want is we want it to be secure. If I had a second pair of hands, which I don't yet, they're in the mail, they're coming. I'm actually going to go ahead and I'm going to trim this down just a bit. It's a little long for soldering onto that leg at this point. There. Go ahead and heat that leg up again. The wire in it. There you go. There's one leg, or one wire in the on a leg where it should be. We'll go ahead and we'll trim this one up just a bit. Again, it looks like it's going to be a little too long. We'll dunk it into the flux paste. And we'll turn our board again here. Make sure our iron is still hot. And there we go. Now we've got our second wire attached. So now what we're going to do is we're going to flip the whole board over. And we're just going to go about soldering each and every one of these points. Now I did forget to wire my wires through, so let me flip it back over again. We're going to take this wire here, and it's going to go through the hole where this leg should have gone. And then this wire here is going to go through the leg where this wire should have gone. Right like that. I'm just going to go ahead and I'm going to bend these upward because I'm just going to lay the whole board down like I said before. It's going to lay down on top of it. Make sure that our little wires are coming through there. We want to make sure that they're not touching anything else. Very important that they're not touching any of the legs or anything like that. Make sure they're as straight as possible. Because if they touch anything else, it could cause a short. You don't want that. There we go. Okay, make sure that our iron stays hot. And this will probably be on time lapse if it makes it in at all at this point. Alright guys, so that's how we do that. I will come back and I will see yins after I go ahead and solder in the second one. See you in a bit. Okay guys, so I've gone ahead and I've finished soldering in our two UV EPROMs that we programmed slayers onto. You can see that pins 24 and 31 are swapped on both ICs.
And if you look at the back here, I remember when I was taking the first chip off, remember I mentioned that I'd lifted a pad. So what I did, because this particular pin didn't have a pad any longer to connect to, you follow the trace that it's connected to up. You can see there was this extra point. Unfortunately, there was no copper underneath that extra point. It's merely just a marker, I guess. So you follow it up a little further, and you actually see that it connects to pin number 24 on the second EEPROM. That was actually pin number 24 on the first EEPROM. So we got really, really lucky. We can actually just connect both of those to the same pin spot, and it will still pull voltage from the Super Nintendo. So now all we have to do is very carefully reassemble our cartridge. So I'm just going to pull this wire up out of the way. It's just going to kind of sit here. I got to double check real quick to make sure that nothing is touching anything else, and it doesn't appear to be. So here's our Troy Aikman football. This case is really worse for the wear. We're really just going to go ahead and we're going to reassemble it just long enough to go ahead and test it. You guys can see it sits almost exactly the way that it was supposed to in there. So that means that I've got to go in and I've got to look and see what's causing it to catch. So we've gone ahead, got the Troy Aikman football put back together with the replacement board. And let's see here. I don't know how well this is turning out for you guys because I'm just kind of eyeballing things here. But let's go ahead and we'll turn on the system and see what it does. If it does anything. Oh, look at that. Look at that. That, my friends, is a reproduction cartridge. With the translation patch running. That's phenomenal. Not bad for being out of the game for 5 years. So make sure you guys like the video, comment, subscribe, get the bell on, get all the notifications. If you guys want reproductions, let me know. I am making them again. See you guys next time.